This is AutoComplete, episode 16. I'm Brian Cooley. It's the news of the intersection of cars and technology, brought to you by Roadshow at theroadshow.com. New on Roadshow this week, we went for a nice ride down PCH with Emmy Hall in the new Rolls-Royce Dawn convertible in metal butterscotch. It's a hell of a color. I think you want to see that. The Carfection guys in London went to Africa for an off-road romp in a BMW X5, and we got some good seat time in the Jaguar F-Pace. Did that over in Montenegro. So our passports have been stamped, and we got a lot of tasty content waiting for you on those cars and more over at theroadshow.com. Let's get into the news. Mitsubishi has now taken and stolen the shade from VW. It's like now the latest of the scandals with their MPG cheating that they are admitting to. Now, here's the latest that we know. They have some 25 years of MPG cheating that they've been doing this. It's really deep, much longer than VW cheated on diesel emissions. California Air Resources Board and federal EPA here in the U.S. have now told Mitsubishi they have to undergo more stringent special tests. They're basically on probation right now, as you might imagine. Apparently, the main cheat was during what's called the coast down segment of the EPA test, where a car coasts down from 80 miles an hour down to a stop, and that is measured. And apparently, that's where they mostly cheated on the MPG. Now, there was a report you may have heard about in the mainstream media a couple days ago that the COO and the CEO have both decided to resign from Mitsubishi in Japan at the headquarters office, and that the company, according to the COO, is in threat of not existing because of the impact of this. As of today, the COO denies that report and denies that he and the CEO are leaving. That's where it's at right now. Or that there's any existential threat to Mitsubishi. And by the way, a note, there's Mitsubishi, the company, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, that's the parent company. This is, of course, Mitsubishi Motors, which is a subdivision, a big one, but a subdivision of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. So we're talking about the Motors division, not about Mitsubishi Heavy, when we talk about the impact of this at a corporate level, and if they would have to, by any stretch, fold up shop and leave any market, let alone the U.S. or wherever you're watching. We'll keep an eye out for that. Here's the stupidest thing you can ever do. Cheat on emissions to the point that VW did, and create a PowerPoint documenting how and that you did it, and circulate that around on the company's servers. That's apparently, according to a New York Times story with sources that they've been talking to, exactly what happened to VW. There was a PowerPoint put together. We're not sure, no one having seen it, whether it was boasting or just documenting or somehow otherwise circulating this concept, but it doesn't sound real smart, because this cuts against the grain of other stories we've heard, in that a lot of the engineers at VW apparently used a lot of code words to keep this all very hush-hush, so that it wouldn't be easy to go back and follow the trail of how the Dieselgate cheat was done. But then here is something totally opposite, a PowerPoint document. Now, what is not known is who saw it and when. Your classic smoking gun question. How high up did this go? Who at the senior levels and the upper executive management offices ever saw this thing, and when did they see it? That is not yet clear, but we're going to keep an eye on this. We also have a lot of details coming out from VW's recent financial reporting. The buyback will cost about $9 billion, they expect. That was the offer that came up that we had for you last week, the breaking news that they would buy back cars from customers who just simply wanted to get rid of their spewing cars. They took an $18 billion write-down in 2015, just now, and with their latest earnings release, for the, so far, damage of Dieselgate, billions more in damage to come. VW had a loss of $144 million in the most recent quarter, chump change for them. Now, here's the other more sort of counterintuitive news. VW saw a 5% increase in its overall revenue in 2015, the top line stuff, compared to a year before, so that's a positive indicator. They passed Toyota last year to nonetheless become the largest car maker, even though almost half of the year was stained by Dieselgate, and their overall return on sales dropped financially from just 2.5% to 2%. The bottom didn't exactly fall out. Also, VW said during that earnings announcement that they also are looking to partner with investors and strategic partners, noting, though, clearly that among them are not, and apparently will not, be Google or Apple. Another indication of kind of the frenemy bad blood in the auto industry and in some of the original players in Silicon Valley. Now, right about now, this week, we were expecting to have new details for you on what VW has learned so far about how Dieselgate took place. Who knew what, when, what did they do, and when did they do it? VW has pulled the plug on that this week. At the last minute, they said, nope, we're not going to issue preliminary data on what our investigation is learning. We're going to wait until it's all done, and we have a settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice on paper in writing, and then they say they'll release the report of what they learned. So they're keeping it hush-hush because, for the obvious reason, they're claiming it's such a hot litigious environment, they can't be basically giving their enemies ammunition right now. So unfortunately, this is not the week, and there will apparently not be a week anytime soon when we can tell you the juicy details as they are coming out of the investigation. That could change, though. We'll see what regulators and lawmakers force them to release. Now, on a little cleaner front, Honda's Clarity cars. Honda recently unveiled, as we reported here, the new Accord Hybrid, the 17 Accord Hybrid, getting that car back into that category. But more interesting is how they're expanding the Clarity, which is a very odd model. The Clarity is just coming out as a fuel cell vehicle only in California. So super niche, right? Either an experiment or a compliance car, depending how you want to look at it. But now Honda says, no, the Clarity is going to be for real. They're also going to have a pure electric battery version and a plug-in version. The plug-in, they say, will get 40 miles on electric-only mode before it has to go into blended mode. That would make it, as I recall, the highest range plug-in hybrid if that's the way it stands when it comes out. Now, there's a lot of time they have to get this technology even better because the plug-in and the battery car are not due until late next year, 2017. The fuel cell, of course, is arriving later this year in California, as I mentioned, and that is going to be about exactly 1 year later than Toyota's Mirai, which came out tail end of last year as their for a fuel cell vehicle that is also California only. So interesting double down, triple bet, if you will, on the Clarity brand over at Honda. We've told you, and our Tim Stevens, in fact, got a look at Volvo's Drive Me program some months ago. It's going to be rolled out in Gothenburg, one of the first pilots in a major city where a fleet of largely self-driving cars will be using public roads to test themselves. Now it's not going to be just in the home market. Apparently, Volvo is going to expand that test program to London. So to our London viewers and listeners, sometime perhaps next year, you will start seeing Volvo XC90s that are driving themselves around London, which, knowing the traffic and congestion there, that's a whole other challenge. Compared to Gothenburg. A new coalition says autonomous vehicles need to happen soon and consistently. It's a coalition of Ford, Volvo, Google, Uber, and Lyft. Those five got together this week to form a new group called the Self-Driving Coalition for Safer Streets. Can you imagine a more BS title for a group? I mean, that's just completely playing to everyone out there and just polishing up the apple, right? So the idea here is that they want to see a consistent single set of rules and regulations for self-driving cars. Their main agenda item is not a patchwork of regulations, but federal level regulation of what autonomous cars can do, should do, what controls they can or cannot get rid of, all of that basket of stuff. They want that to be a national push because they dread 50 states. Or even 20 different state sets of regulations, or even 2 for that matter, would be economically disastrous to development, they say. David Strickland, by the way, is going to head up this new group. You may recall his name. He's been in the news for a number of years in our podcast and newscasts here about the times when he was head of NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Now he's working for the car makers and the ride services to go back to NHTSA and others and lobby their point of view for a single form of regulation. Quick note here, car sales were surprisingly strong last year. A lot of folks said we will never break the 17 million number in the U.S. in 2015. We blew by it by a few hundred thousand. That was surprising. So you might say, okay, this is the year of contraction. No, April numbers look as though we're going to be at about a 17.6 million run rate. According to the latest numbers on U.S. automotive sales. There just seems to be no ceiling on the robustness of car sales in the U.S., and you know how much of that is coming from crossovers, especially compact crossovers. When we come back, let's talk about whether Apple's building a car or not. It's becoming a fever pitch discussion, especially with Apple's most recent disappointing results. And is Tesla good at building cars? We'll kick that around when AutoComplete continues. AutoComplete from The Roadshow. I'm Brian Cooley, editor-at-large. Continuing with our news this week, a lot of reports have been flying about whether or not Apple's building a car. The most recent coming out of a newspaper in Frankfurt that said that Apple has a big hiring spree going on in Germany, poaching dissatisfied young engineers from the well-known German car companies and building a skunkworks in that company, as well as Silicon Valley office where the Project Titan got started. At the same time, there's an awful lot of discussion coming from Wall Street pundits that Apple would never want to build cars because the margins are so poor. Apple's used to making a ton of money on iPhones and iPads and everything that they make. Their margins are great. The auto industry is the best way to really chew through capital. You can put a ton of money into your car company and not really get much out the other end, and even that's not a guaranteed bet. So this is one of the biggest trends that's going on right now, is the Wall Street think that Apple does not want to get into this business. Never mind the technology. Never mind what cool stuff they could do. Does it make sense for a company that is used to enormous profit margins to get into this business now, especially as they've had a historic, first time in years, down quarter that, of course, was just reported a couple of days ago, earlier this week. Apple's under enormous pressure to come up with the next big thing that is massively profitable, not just the next cool technology, which Wall Street will not be interested in without the massive profit piece. I'm going to go on record this week. This could change, but this week saying I just don't buy the Apple building cars thing. It doesn't add up in a number of ways. The financial piece is a big part of it, and the fact that, when Apple built the iPhone and launched so many of its products, in some cases, it was also able to build the roads as well, if you will. Think about iTunes as a highway system, and the iPod originally was the cars that rode on it. They had both pieces. Look at iPhone and look at the apps universe. Same thing. They kind of built an infrastructure of roads. The apps economy is a superhighway or an interstate system. And then they had iPhone to especially well work with it. Here, they won't have that ability. They cannot build a car that then runs on special Apple roads to truly become a rich ecosystem of performance and unique offer. It just doesn't work that way in the physical infrastructure world. That's another one that's been nagging me and other people, that Apple it doesn't really make that much sense that they would get into cars. And to be honest, I think for them to hire 600 people and do a deep exploration, with their deep pockets, that isn't necessarily a commitment to an industry. It's a lot of people, it's a lot of money to most companies. For Apple, that could actually just be a trial balloon. A big one, but a trial balloon. Here's another example why building cars is a dicey business. Ford announcing it will upgrade the Livonia, Michigan assembly plant to start making 10-speed transmissions for F-150s. Okay, it's a transmission that they co-developed with General Motors, by the way. They're going to spend $1.4 billion, with a B, to upgrade that plant, to make just this one transmission among many that they make. Now, of course, F-150 will get it. That's a big volume. But it just goes to give you some indication of the enormous amount of money that the car industry chews up to do something relatively minor. Is Tesla good at building cars? I'll tell you, when I talk to Tesla owners, I get one of two responses. Their car is either flawless, has had no problems, or their car has a million things that are always wrong with it. I don't mean anybody in the middle. It's just strange. Anecdotal, no scientific evidence there. But here's an interesting story from Reuters that we were looking at this week. They did a deep analysis of Tesla's financials and found that Tesla spends a lot more on warranty repairs than some of the other big mainstream car makers. For example, last year, according to Reuters numbers, they kind of have to read the tea leaves here, Tesla spent over $1,000, $1,043 per car they made on warranty fixes. Compare that to GM, which spent $400 per car, Ford, $429, and Daimler, I should say, $970. So getting closer to what Tesla spent. And there's also another one here, the future set aside for future warranty repairs. Tesla sets aside $2,036 per car for future warranty work. Ford, $308. Daimler, $1,294. Again, getting closer to Tesla's number, but still a lot lower, many hundreds lower. Tesla earnings, by the way, come out on the 4th of May. Now, a lot of recalls out there have been making news. Many of them are very drastic and seriously badly engineered systems. Here's one that is much more subtle than that. Fiat Chrysler is recalling 800,000 vehicles. Most of them are Dodge, Chrysler, and Jeep larger vehicles. Dodge Chargers, Chrysler 300s, and Jeep Grand Cherokees. I'll give you the years in a minute. But they're doing it because the shifter is too hard to figure out. Nothing wrong with it. Just too hard to figure out. If you know one of these cars or have one of these cars, it has kind of a T shifter that is kind of a lopsided T. There's a long arm over to the top of the T there. And all you do is click it back and forth. It's a detent selector. It's basically a toggle. You click it once to each time you want to go up another gear, position, or down from PRND back and forth. The shifter always snaps back to the exact same position. It's one of those. Turns out it confuses a lot of people, and they have the car in a reverse or drive mode when they think it's in park. And Fiat Chrysler says 41 injuries might be related to this misunderstanding. So they're going to recall the cars. They can't change the shifter. That's too expensive. It's still going to be a click detent thing, but they're going to change the way that it communicates what gear position it is with apparently better indicator lights. Sometimes you just can't help yourself. You know, as you try to go forward and make something a little more nuanced and high-tech, it may just leave some folks at the station. Land Rover needs a tech upgrade. Land Rover just got a tech upgrade. I've never been a big fan of their head units. They and Jag have been middling at best. But here's a new one that just came out. I can't wait to get my hands on it. It's the In Control Touch Pro. It's going to be the high-end model in Land Rover units. 10-inch widescreen, set up high in the dash and all of that, but a dramatically better smartphone-like experience, they say, that will have, among other things, something called a driver condition monitor that will monitor all of your inputs in the car and let you know if you're drowsy. I believe that's new for them. Other car makers have had it. Intelligent speed limit, where the car will look at speed limit signs, read them, and warn you about your differential, which I think makes sense in cars. I don't know why cars today don't more universally embrace that. And they will also have an active lane keep assist in that package. Again, pretty conventional stuff. But looking forward to a new head unit in a Land Rover. If you're buying a Land Rover, check with your dealer on when the model that you're looking at will get this new In Control Touch Pro, is what they call this new head unit. Maybe you want to hold off until they have this in the model you're looking at. And last story I got for you this week is one that kind of makes a whole lot of sense, and you have to wonder why it didn't happen earlier. Jag Land Rover, across their models, are going to soon enable another app in their head unit that will let you work with Tile. Tile is that little thing you attach to your keys, your laptop, your bag, what have you, so you don't lose them. It works with Bluetooth. Well, your car has Bluetooth. So the idea is you can set up an essentials checklist, and the car will know before you drive out of the driveway and go to work that day. You can tell it, check, do I have everything with me that I put on my list? So that could be my laptop, my keys, my wallet, my phone. I'm not sure how you forget your phone, or whatever else it is you need to carry, your lunch, whatever it might be. So that'll be built in so the car can kind of check inside itself and say, something's not here. Before you take off, why don't you go back in the house and get it? I think we all know that one. Okay, folks, that's it for this week's news around the intersection of cars and tech from Roadshow. I'm Brian Cooley, editor-at-large. Make sure you check out our latest stories at theroadshow.com. Go get a look at that metallic butterscotch Rolls-Royce and take a look at what Chris Paukert found about the Jag F-Pace over in Montenegro. We'll see you next week.